In a quiet town, there was a large house at the end of a narrow street. The house was old, but well kept, with shiny windows and a garden that was always full of flowers. Inside the house, everything looked clean and in order, but it was clear that someone worked very hard to keep it that way. That someone was an elderly maid who had been working there for many years. She was small, quiet, and moved carefully through the rooms, making sure everything was perfect. She wore simple clothes, and her hair was always tied back neatly. She never asked for attention, and no one really noticed her much. She was just there, doing her work. The maid had a routine. Every morning, she would wake up early, make breakfast for the family, clean the rooms, and then move on to dusting, sweeping, and polishing every corner of the house. She had a way of moving that was almost invisible, like she was part of the walls. The family and the few guests who visited saw her as a kind, quiet woman who worked hard but did not say much. She did not complain, and she never interrupted anyone. She smiled politely when spoken to, but most of the time, she kept to herself. In one corner of the large living room stood a grand piano. It was beautiful, black and shiny, with golden edges that caught the sunlight from the windows. The piano was impressive, and it always drew attention, but no one ever used it much. It was kept for special occasions, or when the family wanted to play music. The maid often passed by it quietly, and sometimes she would stop for a moment, resting her hand lightly on the smooth surface. She would close her eyes and listen to the faint sound of the wind outside, imagining music that no one else could hear. There was something about the piano that called to her, something deep and familiar. But she never sat down to play it. She had learned long ago that music was a part of her life that belonged to the past. And the present was all about work. Even though she was unnoticed, the maid had a careful eye for detail. She could spot a speck of dust on a shelf from across the room. She noticed when flowers in the garden were wilting and carefully replaced them with fresh ones. She could sense when something was out of place or when someone in the house was unhappy. People came and went, but she remained steady and reliable. Guests sometimes complimented the house for being so clean and beautiful, but they rarely noticed the maid who made it all possible. She did not mind. Recognition was not what she wanted. She found satisfaction in knowing that she had done her work well. Even if no one else saw it, the maid's life outside the house was simple. She lived in a small, modest apartment not far from the town. She did not have close friends, and her family lived far away. Most days she returned home, cooked a simple meal for herself, and spent her evenings reading or sitting quietly. She did not need excitement or attention. Her life was peaceful, even if it was lonely at times. She liked it that way. There was a calmness in her routine, a rhythm that felt safe. There were small hints that her life had been different once. Her hands were nimble, with long fingers that moved gracefully. And there was a certain light in her eyes when she passed the piano. Sometimes, when the house was empty, she would pause and press her fingers lightly on the keys, just touching them, not playing. It was as if the piano remembered her touch, even if no one else did. She never played loudly or in public. She had learned long ago to hide her talents. Life had taught her that showing too much could bring disappointment. Disappointment was something she wanted to avoid. The family she worked for did not know about her past. To them, she was just the quiet maid who kept everything in order. They knew she was older and careful, but they did not imagine the depth of her experiences or the skills she had once practiced. She had stories in her mind, stories of music and dreams, but she shared them with no one. She carried them quietly like a treasure hidden deep inside. Sometimes, when she dusted the piano, she would imagine herself in another place, playing for a crowd, feeling the applause and letting the music flow freely from her heart. But those moments were private, fleeting, and always followed by the reality of her work. The town around the house moved quickly. People rushed to their jobs, children ran through the streets laughing, and markets were always busy with voices and movement. But inside the large house, time felt different. It was slower, more deliberate. The maid's presence added to that calmness. Even when the family had guests, she moved quietly, serving drinks, clearing dishes, and ensuring that everything went smoothly. Guests sometimes noticed her politeness or the way she anticipated their needs, but they rarely paused to think about who she was beyond the uniform she wore. One morning, the house was filled with the smell of fresh bread and flowers. The maid moved through the rooms with her usual care, straightening cushions, wiping tables, and checking that every surface shone. The sunlight poured through the windows, catching the dust motes in the air, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. She paused in front of the piano, brushing her hand lightly over the keys. There was a faint smile on her face, almost imperceptible, as if she remembered something precious. She did not play, only touched, and then moved on with her work. Yet, anyone looking closely could see that the piano was more than furniture to her. It was a part of her life that she had never abandoned. Even if no one knew it, the maid's routine was interrupted one day when the family received unexpected guests. The house became busy, filled with laughter, chatter, and movement. The maid worked quietly, serving drinks and making sure everything was ready. She noticed the excitement in the air, but she stayed calm. She moved like she had done 1,000 times before, always in the background, unnoticed but essential. As she passed the piano, she felt a familiar pull, a reminder of the music she had once loved, but she did not give in to it. Her place was in the service, not in the spotlight. Despite her quiet life, there was a strength in the maid that no one saw. She had endured hardships, losses, and years of labor without complaint. She had learned patience, humility, and the power of quiet observation. She understood people better than they understood themselves. She could sense tension, fear, or sadness, and she knew how to respond with small gestures of care. These qualities made her indispensable, even if invisible. The piano, though silent, seemed to echo her inner strength, waiting for the moment when it could reveal the music hidden inside her as the day went on. The maid continued her work, moving from room to room with quiet efficiency. She noticed every detail, anticipating the needs of the family and guests. Yet, in her mind, there were melodies, fragments of songs, and memories of music that had once defined her. She remembered the joy of playing, the feeling of keys beneath her fingers, and the thrill of performing. These memories were bittersweet, reminding her of a life that could have been, but also giving her a quiet happiness that no one could take away. By evening, the guests had left, and the house returned to its usual calm. The maid moved through the rooms, tidying and preparing for the next day. She paused by the piano once more, brushing the keys gently. She imagined a song, a melody that told a story of her life, of quiet strength and hidden talent. She did not play it for anyone, but in that moment it existed, alive in her mind. She smiled softly, feeling a sense of peace. No one had noticed, no one had applauded, but it did not matter. The music was hers, and that was enough. The maid continued her life, unnoticed by most, but rich with the music and memories she carried inside. She moved through her days with care, patience, and quiet dignity. The piano remained a silent witness to her hidden talent, a reminder that even in the most ordinary lives, there can be extraordinary gifts. And though no one in the house imagined what she could do, she knew. The music was there, waiting just as she was. For the right moment to reveal itself, the elderly maid had been working in the house for many years. But few people knew anything about her life outside of her duties. She carried a quiet strength and a gentle presence that everyone relied on. Yet they never wondered about the person behind the uniform. What they could not see was that her life had once been very different. Before she became a maid, before the years of service and routine, she had been a young woman with dreams and talent that reached far beyond the walls of the house she now cleaned. Long ago, she had learned to play the piano. Her first lessons had come from a teacher who had seen her potential when she was just a child. She had been small and shy, but when she sat at the piano, something remarkable happened. Her fingers moved with grace and precision, and the music seemed to flow naturally from her. She spent hours practicing, losing herself in the melodies, imagining a life filled with performances and applause. Music was not just a hobby. It was her voice, the way she expressed emotions that she could not put into words. Life, however, was not always kind. Circumstances changed quickly and often, and she was forced to set aside her dreams. Family hardships, financial struggles, and responsibilities took precedence. The piano that had been her sanctuary became a reminder of a world she could no longer fully enter. She practiced when she could, but always in private, in small moments stolen between chores and obligations. She had learned to hide her talent, to protect it from a world that might not understand or value it. Even as she moved into her later years, her love for music did not fade. She could still hear the songs in her mind, remember every lesson and every piece she had ever played. The melodies were like old friends, comforting and familiar. She often walked past the piano in the house where she worked and felt a connection that was deeper than anything she experienced in her daily tasks. It was not just an instrument. It was a bridge to a part of herself that remained untouched by time and hardship. Her past was a secret she carried quietly. She did not speak of it because few people would understand, and even if they did, it might change how they saw her. She had learned that the world often judged people too quickly, focusing on appearances rather than the depth of experience beneath them. As a maid, she was invisible to many, and she liked it that way. Her life was modest, unassuming, and safe. But inside, the music remained vibrant, waiting for a moment when it could be shared. The house where she worked became a place where she could observe life quietly. She noticed the interactions of the family, the laughter of children, and the way guests behaved when they visited. She understood people because she watched them closely. She also noticed the piano, the grand instrument that stood in the living room, always polished and ready. It called to her quietly, but she resisted the temptation to play. The rules of her life were clear: work first, desires second. Sometimes she allowed herself to dream in small ways. When the house was empty, she would touch the keys lightly, letting her fingers rest on them, feeling the smooth surface. She imagined a melody flowing from her fingertips, filling the room with music, telling a story of her life. It was a secret joy, a way to keep her spirit alive even as she carried out her duties. No one could see it, and that was exactly how she wanted it. The music was hers, pure and private. Her memories of lessons and performances were vivid. She remembered the thrill of her first recital, the nervous excitement before sitting at the piano, the warmth of applause, and the satisfaction of playing perfectly. She remembered the encouragement from her teacher, the small victories when she mastered a difficult piece, and the quiet pride in herself when she played with emotion. Those memories were treasures she carried, reminders that she had once been capable of greatness. Even if life had taken her in another direction, despite the passage of time, her skill had not diminished. The strength of her fingers, the coordination, the sense of rhythm and timing were all still there. She practiced quietly when she could. In the early morning before her duties, or late at night after the house had gone to sleep, she knew that the music would never leave her, and that thought gave her a quiet joy that nothing else could replace. It was her connection to herself, her past, and the person she had always been. Beyond the uniform and the chores, the family she served remained unaware of the depth of her talent. To them, she was dependable, polite, and quiet, but nothing more. They did not see the spark in her eyes when she passed the piano or the gentle tension in her fingers when she moved near it. The maid understood that this was part of life. People often saw only what they wanted to see, and it was not her concern to change their perceptions. She found satisfaction in her work and in the small moments when she could indulge her secret love for music one day. While cleaning the living room, she noticed a young girl in the family watching her. The girl was curious, fascinated by the careful way the maid worked, the precision and care in every movement. The maid smiled briefly but continued her work. She remembered her own childhood, the curiosity and wonder she had once had, and she felt a small warmth in her heart. She could see the girl's potential for creativity, for curiosity, as it reminded her of herself many years ago. The piano seemed to call to her more strongly that day. The young girl approached it, asking if she could play. The maid watched silently, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and longing. She remembered the joy of playing and the sense of freedom it gave her. For a moment she imagined sitting beside the girl, teaching her, sharing the music that had been her companion for so long. But she remained quiet, observing, letting the child explore. And keeping her own dreams close to her heart, life continued in its quiet rhythm. The maid moved through the house, carrying out her duties with care and precision. The piano remained a silent presence, a reminder of a life she had not forgotten. Her past, full of music and dreams, was still alive within her. She cherished it quietly, knowing that one day, the right moment might come when the music could be shared, and the hidden talent she carried would no longer need to remain invisible. Until then, she remained patient, strong, and quietly determined. Holding on to the part of herself that no one else could take away, one afternoon, the house became unusually busy. The family had invited a small group of friends over for tea, and the rooms were filled with laughter and conversation. The elderly maid moved quietly through the crowd, carrying trays of drinks and delicacies, placing each item carefully where it belonged. She was always aware of her surroundings, always attentive, yet she remained invisible to most of the guests. They smiled politely at her, sometimes giving a nod of acknowledgement, but they never stopped to see her as a person beyond her duties. The grand piano in the living room caught the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Its black surface gleamed, and the gold accents reflected the light in a way that drew the eye. People occasionally glanced at it and joked about who might play a tune, but the maid noticed it differently. It was more than a piece of furniture. It was a presence, almost alive, waiting for someone to awaken it. Her fingers twitched slightly when she passed it, a faint reminder of the years she had spent learning and perfecting her craft. For a moment, she allowed herself a private thought, imagining the melodies she could play, the music that could fill the room, and move the people in it. Then she returned to her duties, pushing the desire back down and keeping it hidden. As the guests settled into their seats and conversation flowed, someone mentioned music. It started as a lighthearted comment, almost a joke, about who might dare to play on such a beautiful piano. The maid paused briefly, just long enough for a faint ripple of recognition to pass across the room, though no one noticed. Her heart beat a little faster. The moment felt significant, almost electric. There was a subtle tension in the air, as if the piano itself was waiting for someone to step forward. Her mind raced with the possibilities, but her lips remained sealed. She was still the quiet maid, unnoticed and underestimated. One of the guests, perhaps out of curiosity or mischief, asked the family if anyone knew how to play. A few people laughed, shaking their heads. The conversation bounced lightly around the room, and everyone assumed that no one would answer. Then, without thinking too much about it, the elderly maid stepped forward. The motion was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight of anticipation that no one could see. She moved toward the piano slowly, her steps deliberate. Some people looked up, surprised, unsure if she was serious. A few whispered to each other, exchanging glances and chuckles. They did not expect anything extraordinary. After all, she was just the maid. They had never imagined that someone in her position could possess such skill. She approached the piano and stood silently for a moment. The room seemed to hush around her. The laughter and chatter of the guests faded into a quiet background hum. She placed her hands gently on the keys, letting her fingers rest there lightly. The sensation of the smooth surface under her touch brought back memories of long-forgotten lessons, early morning practices, and moments of triumph. Her fingers itched to move, to awaken the music that had been patiently waiting inside her for so many years. She closed her eyes for a brief second, gathering herself, feeling the anticipation in the room. She could sense the doubt and curiosity of the guests, but she pushed aside their expectations and focused on the music that was hers alone. The first notes she played were soft, tentative, almost shy. They floated gently through the room, delicate and full of emotion. The guests turned toward her, some with curiosity, others with disbelief. The maid did not look at them. She focused entirely on the piano, letting the music guide her hands. Each note carried a story, a fragment of her life, her struggles, her dreams, and her quiet resilience. The room became still, as if everyone had been drawn into a spell. The music was intimate, personal, yet it reached the hearts of those who listened, touching them in ways that words never could. As she continued to play, the confidence in her movements grew. Her fingers danced across the keys with precision and grace, the melodies rising and falling like gentle waves. The guests watched in awe, their initial disbelief melting into admiration. Some leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the unexpected beauty of the performance. They had never imagined that the quiet, elderly maid could create such music, let alone fill the room with it. The sound was pure, rich, and moving, revealing the depth of her hidden talent. Each chord carried a part of her life story, a language of emotions that transcended words. The maid's eyes remained closed, her expression serene yet focused. She was not performing for applause or recognition. She was playing because it was who she was, because the music had been with her through every hardship, every quiet day, and every moment of longing. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only the piano, the notes, and the emotions they carried. Guests who had been chatting moments before were now silent, captivated by the unexpected power of the performance. Even the family, who had always known her as dependable but quiet, felt a new depth to her presence, as if they were witnessing a part of her soul for the first time. The maid played for several minutes, her fingers moving with an elegance that spoke of years of dedication and passion. The music swelled and softened, rising and falling like waves, filled with both joy and sorrow. The guests were mesmerized, many with tears forming in their eyes, touched by the honesty and beauty of the performance. The room held a sense of reverence, an unspoken understanding that they were witnessing something rare and profound. It was not just a performance. It was a revelation, a glimpse into a life that had been hidden in plain sight. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, there was a brief silence, a moment where everyone seemed unsure what to do. The music lingered in the air, leaving an impression that could not be easily forgotten. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first, it was hesitant, as if people were testing whether this was real. But soon, it grew louder, stronger, and more heartfelt. Guests rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, their eyes wide with admiration. The maid opened her eyes, still composed and calm, acknowledging the response with a small, humble smile. She did not seek this recognition, but it was a confirmation that her music had reached hearts, just as she had always hoped it could. The room buzzed with conversation as guests shared their amazement, discussing the unexpected talent of the elderly maid. They spoke of how they had underestimated her, how they had judged her by her appearance and role, and how wrong they had been. She listened quietly, not needing to respond. She knew that the music itself had spoken more than any words could. Her heart was full, not because of the applause, but because she had been able to share the music that had always been a part of her, a gift that no one could take away from that day on. The perception of the maid in the house changed. She was no longer just a quiet presence, unnoticed and underestimated. She had shown a depth of talent and emotion that could not be ignored. People who once overlooked her now approached her with respect and curiosity, eager to hear more of the music she could create. Yet, she remained humble and grounded, understanding that her worth was not measured by recognition, but by the connection she felt to the music. In the integrity of her life, the performance became a turning point, not only for the guests and family, but for the maid herself. It reminded her that her talent was not forgotten, that her dreams and skills still mattered. Even in a life that had been filled with routine and service, she realized that the music she carried was powerful, capable of touching others and revealing the unseen depths of her soul. The piano, which had always been a silent witness, had finally become a voice, expressing everything she had kept hidden for so long. And though the maid continued her duties with the same quiet care, there was now a subtle sense of pride and fulfillment in her movements, a knowledge that she had shared a piece of herself with the world, even if just for a fleeting moment. After that first surprising moment, the elderly maid continued to play, letting the music flow naturally. Each note seemed to tell a story of her life, full of struggles, patience, and hidden dreams. Her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, creating melodies that were both delicate and powerful. The room was silent except for the sound of the piano. Guests, family, and even the staff, who had watched quietly, were completely captivated. They could feel the emotions behind every note. And it became clear that this was more than just a performance. It was an expression of a life lived quietly. Yet profoundly, the music grew richer and more complex as she played. She shifted seamlessly between soft, gentle passages and stronger, more commanding chords. It was as if she were speaking without words, telling the audience about the years she had devoted to work and survival while carrying her talent quietly inside. Some people in the room had tears in their eyes, moved not only by the beauty of the music, but by the realization that they had underestimated her. They had seen her as just a maid, quiet and ordinary. Never imagining the depth of her experience or the skill she possessed, the maid's eyes remained partially closed, her focus entirely on the music. She did not play for the recognition, and she did not seek admiration. She played because it was who she was, because the music had always been a companion through lonely times and hard days. She remembered her past lessons and recitals, hours of practice and dedication, and she poured all that into her performance. Each note reflected the years of discipline, the sacrifices she had made, and the quiet determination that had carried her through life. As the melodies continued, the atmosphere in the room changed. Guests who had been skeptical or joking moments before now watched in awe. Even the family, who had known her for years, felt a new sense of respect and wonder. They realized that for so long they had overlooked the richness of her life. Her music became a bridge, connecting her past to the present and allowing others to see the extraordinary talent that had been hidden for so long. The room was filled with a mix of admiration, surprise, and genuine emotion. People felt privileged to witness such a moment. The music was not rushed. It unfolded naturally, giving each note and phrase space to breathe. The maid played with a balance of precision and emotion, her years of experience evident in every movement. The audience could sense that this was not just skill, but also heart, that every sound carried meaning. Some guests closed their eyes to immerse themselves fully, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, unable to look away, captivated by the elegance and depth of the performance. It was as if time had slowed down, and all that mattered was the piano and the story it was telling at one point. She played a passage that was soft and almost fragile, a reflection of the vulnerability she had carried in her life. The audience could feel the tenderness and the quiet strength intertwined in her music. It spoke of years of unseen effort, of resilience, and of dreams kept alive despite the challenges. The maid did not play for praise. She played because it was the most natural way for her to express herself, to communicate what words could never convey. The emotion in the room was palpable, and everyone present felt connected to her story in some way. Then the music shifted to a stronger, more commanding section. Her fingers flew across the keys with confidence and grace, creating a sense of power and presence. The audience felt the energy of her past, the intensity of her training, and the force of her determination. It was inspiring, a reminder that even in the most ordinary lives, extraordinary talents can exist. The contrast between the gentle, emotional passages and the bold, assertive chords made the performance even more compelling. Showing the full range of her abilities and experiences, throughout the performance, the maid remained composed and humble. She did not look for approval, and she did not seek to impress. Her focus was entirely on the music and the story it told. The audience could sense her authenticity, the honesty in every note, and it made the experience even more powerful. There was a connection that transcended words, a shared understanding of beauty, emotion, and human experience. People were not just watching someone play the piano, they were witnessing a piece of her soul revealed through music. By the time she reached the final notes, the audience was completely captivated. The music softened, fading gently into silence, leaving a sense of calm and awe in the room. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. The notes lingered in the air, a reminder of the depth and beauty they had just experienced. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first it was tentative, almost in disbelief, but it grew quickly into enthusiastic, heartfelt clapping. People stood, some cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes, all moved by the extraordinary talent of someone they had underestimated for so long. The maid lifted her hands from the keys, her expression serene and calm. She acknowledged the applause with a gentle nod, a small, humble smile playing on her lips. She did not seek the admiration, but it was clear that she had touched the hearts of everyone in the room. People approached her with newfound respect, expressing their awe and gratitude for the music she had shared. They asked questions, complimented her skill, and tried to understand the depth of her talent. Yet she remained modest, gracious, and composed.
Ow.
Knowing that the music itself had spoken louder than any words, the performance became a turning point for everyone present. It reminded the audience that people are often more than they seem, that hidden talents and strengths can exist in the most unexpected places. The maid, who had always been quiet and unseen, had revealed a part of herself that could not be ignored. The piano, which had once been a silent presence, had become a voice, expressing the emotions, memories, and dreams that she had carried for so long. After the guests left, the house returned to its usual quiet rhythm. The maid continued her duties with the same care and attention as always. But there was a subtle difference in the way she moved. There was a lightness in her step, a quiet confidence in her actions, satisfaction in having shared the music that had been such an important part of her life. She no longer felt that her talent was hidden. It had been seen, appreciated, and understood. The music had spoken, and that was enough. From that day on, perception of the maid changed, not only in the eyes of the family and guests, but also in her own eyes. She had demonstrated that age, appearance, and social role do not define a person's abilities or worth. Her music became a reminder that greatness can exist quietly, and that even in ordinary lives, extraordinary talent can flourish. The piano remained in the living room, polished and ready, but now it held a different meaning. It was a symbol of resilience, hidden beauty, and the power of expression. The maid had given voice to her life through music, and it left a lasting impression on everyone who heard it. After the extraordinary performance, the elderly maid returned to her quiet life in the house, but nothing felt quite the same. The family and guests had witnessed a part of her soul that had been hidden for so long. They now looked at her differently, with a mix of respect, admiration, and curiosity. The maid, however, remained humble, continuing her duties with the same care and attention as before. She did not let the praise change her. She understood that the music had revealed a truth about her, a truth that was always present, even if unnoticed. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house shifted subtly. Conversations around her became warmer, more attentive. People listened when she spoke, noticing the calm wisdom in her words and the gentle confidence in her presence. The maid moved through the rooms with her usual quiet efficiency. But now, there was a sense of acknowledgement in the glances she received. Guests would sometimes linger after meals, watching her work with fascination, seeing the skill and dedication that had always been there. The music she had shared had opened their eyes to the depth of her character, reminding them that greatness can exist quietly, unseen. For years before it is finally revealed, the piano remained in the living room, a silent companion that had borne witness to her talent. The maid would often pass by it, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys. She no longer needed to hide her connection to it. The music was a part of her, and now it had been shared with the world. Sometimes, when the house was empty, she would sit down and play for herself, letting the melodies fill the space. She played not for recognition or approval, but for the joy of expression, for the fulfillment of finally embracing the talent that had been with her all her life. Each note was a celebration of her resilience and the life she had led with quiet determination. Word of the performance spread slowly through the community. People who had once overlooked the maid began to see her in a new light. Neighbors, friends of friends, and even strangers who heard of her talent wanted to experience it for themselves. Invitations to small gatherings and informal recitals began to arrive. The maid accepted some of them, though always on her own terms, preferring intimate settings over large, crowded events. She wanted her music to be meaningful, to touch hearts, rather than simply entertain. Each performance was a chance to connect with others, to communicate emotions that could not be expressed through words alone. Through these experiences, the maid discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that her life had been rich with experiences, discipline, and quiet strength, and that these qualities had shaped her music in ways that could inspire others. She began to teach young children in the neighborhood, passing on her knowledge and skill with patience and care. Her lessons were not just about technique. They were about understanding music, expressing emotion, and finding confidence through creativity. Students responded eagerly, drawn to her gentle guidance and the depth of feeling she brought to every lesson. In teaching, she found a new form of fulfillment, one that complemented the quiet satisfaction she had always found in her daily work. Despite the recognition and admiration, the maid remained true to herself. She continued her duties in the house, caring for the family and maintaining the spaces she had always tended. She moved with the same quiet efficiency, yet there was a subtle lightness in her step, a reflection of the inner joy that came from finally embracing her gift. She did not seek fame or attention. Her satisfaction came from the act of creation, from the connection between herself, the piano, and those who listened. Each note she played carried the story of her life, a story of perseverance, humility, and hidden strength. The family also experienced a transformation. They had always valued her as a loyal and diligent presence, but now they understood the depth of her character. They saw her not only as a maid, but as a person with a rich inner life, a talented musician, and a source of inspiration. Their respect for her grew, and their interactions became more genuine and appreciative. They listened to her advice, sought her opinion, and included her in conversations in ways they had never done before. The music she had shared had bridged the gap between service and recognition, showing that talent and dignity can exist in unexpected places. The maid's life was no longer defined solely by routine and duty. Music became a central part of her days, a thread that connected her past to the present and shaped the future. She explored new pieces, experimented with compositions, and reflected on the emotions that had driven her to play in the first place. Each practice session was a moment of freedom, a space where she could express herself fully without constraint. The piano had always been a companion, but now it was a partner in a shared journey, one that brought joy, meaning, and fulfillment. Her story became a lesson for those around her. People learned not to judge others based on appearances or roles. They realized that every person carries a history, talents, and experiences that may not be immediately visible. The maid's life showed that greatness can be quiet, patient, and enduring. It demonstrated that talent and character are not bound by age, position, or circumstance. Her music was a reminder that even in ordinary lives, extraordinary beauty can flourish, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. As time passed, the maid continued to play and teach, always maintaining her humility and grace. Her performances remained intimate, filled with emotion and sincerity. She touched the lives of everyone who heard her, leaving an impression that lasted long after the music ended. She inspired young and old alike, showing that it is never too late to embrace one's talents, to share one's gifts, and to live authentically. The piano, once a silent witness, had become a voice that spoke for her, expressing the depth of her experiences and the strength of her spirit in the quiet moments. When the house was still and the day was ending, the maid would sit at the piano, letting her fingers drift over the keys. She played softly, not for anyone but herself, reliving memories, expressing emotions, and celebrating the journey she had taken. Her music was a testament to resilience, patience, and the power of the human spirit. Each note was a reminder that even lives that seem ordinary from the outside can hold extraordinary beauty and depth within. Through her music, the maid left a lasting legacy. She taught others not just to play, but to feel, to express, and to believe in themselves. She showed that recognition is not the goal. The true reward lies in embracing one's passion, sharing it with sincerity, and allowing it to touch the hearts of others. Her life, once defined by quiet service, became a story of inspiration, proving that hidden talents can change perceptions, transform lives, and create moments of profound connection. In the end, the elderly maid's journey was a celebration of life, talent, and the human spirit. She had spent years quietly, diligently performing her duties, carrying her music within her. When the moment came, she revealed it to the world, and in doing so, she transformed not only the way others saw her, but also how she saw herself. The piano, the music, and the moments of shared emotion became symbols of hope, resilience, and the beauty that can be found in every life, no matter how hidden or humble it may seem. And in that quiet, ordinary house, the extraordinary music continued. A reminder that greatness often waits patiently, ready to emerge when the time is right.